All right, we're going to go over some of the exercises for this third section. These will be covering different types of fallacies. So we'll go over the ones that weren't given at the back of the book, and I might offer some explanations at times where there might be some complicated answers. Hopefully this will help you to understand the different types of fallacies, how to identify them, and so on. All right. The first set of exercises were from Chapter 3, Section 1. And the ones that I'm going to answer here that weren't at the back of the book are numbers 3, 5, and 9. So you were supposed to identify whether the fallacies were formal or informal fallacies. So a formal fallacy, remember, is a fallacy that's basically a deductive type of fallacy. It doesn't really matter what the content is or what's being said. It's just anything of that type or form is going to be invalid. Informal has more to do with the content or the relationship between predicates and conclusion, like the fallacies of relevance that we talked about. So number 3 is one of the first ones I'll talk about. All people who believe we create our own reality are people who lack social responsibility. All people governed by selfish motives are people who lack social responsibility. Therefore, all people who believe we create our own reality are people governed by selfish motives. Because of the relationship between the various predicates in terms of all, makes categorical judgments about all people of a certain class, are people with certain types of predicates. These are formal categories. So this is a formal type of argument. Number 5, renowned violinist Pinchas Zuckerman has said, when it comes to vodka, Smirnoff plays second fiddle to none. We must therefore conclude that Smirnoff is the best vodka available. That's informal fallacy because it has to do with the relationship between, basically it's an analogy between violins and vodka. So it's an informal type because it's not of a formal, logical, or deductive type. Number 9 is a formal. It's a hypothetical syllogism, but of the wrong form. And we will come to understand more about these as we move into later chapters. All right, now we move on into section 3.2, which was the fallacies of relevance. And so here you were to identify the particular types of fallacies that each one committed. So I'll just run through the answers real briefly. In section 1, number 3, it was a red herring argument. It changed the subject. Number 5 is appeal to the people. Appealing to the fact that it sold over 1 million copies is the reason one should read it, is not that relevant to whether it's a book worth reading or not. Number 9 is missing the point. The point about this argument is about improving the schools, not closing them. So that's what the argument should be referring to. Number 11, there is no fallacy. The term morons in that last sentence might lead one to think that it's a type of fallacy. It may not be the best word choice, but it is still not a fallacy. Number 15 is an accident. The First Amendment to the Constitution prevents the government from interfering with the free exercise of religion. The liturgical practice of the religion of internal enlightenment involves human sacrifice. Therefore, it would be wrong for the government to interfere with this religious practice. So clearly this is an exception to the rule of freedom of religion, and so that's an accident fallacy. In section 2 was 10 questions, true, false. I have them all listed here. 1 is false, 2 is true, 3 is false, 4 is true, 5 is false, 6 is false, 7 true, 8 true, 9 true, and 10 true. Then on to section 3.3, more fallacies. In the first section, number 3 is an appeal to unqualified authority. there must be something to psychical research. 3 famous physicists took it seriously. Physicists and psychical research are not the same thing, so that would be therefore an appeal to unqualified authority. Number 5, the accumulation of pressure in a society is similar to the buildup of pressure in a boiler. If the pressure in a boiler increases beyond a critical point, the boiler will explode. Accordingly, if a government represses its people beyond a certain point, the people will rise up in revolt. Now, I would give credit either to weak analogy, because of the comparison between pressure in a boiler and the pressure in a society, but one could also perhaps make a good case that that is not a weak analogy, that there is something to be said for that phenomena in society. So I would give credit for no fallacy as well. That's where some of these examples they're not quite as clear. That's why as we move on in logic, we will come to cases where we completely remove language altogether and we simply look at the formal relationships between predicates and their conclusions and the truth values of the statements that are being symbolized by the terms of the equations. But that's to come in later chapters. Actually, it'll be coming fairly soon. Let's see here. Now we're on to number 9. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett give millions of dollars to charitable causes every year. It must be the case that all wealthy people give huge amounts of money to charity every year. That's a hasty generalization, generalizing from the example of 2 wealthy people to the assumption that all wealthy people give to charity. I actually think that there's been some studies that show that wealthy people tend to give to charities at a lower percentage than non-wealthy people. So that would be something one would need to investigate, but certainly this particular claim is generalizing rather quickly from an example of 2 people. Section 2 was again another true-false. 1 is false, 2 is true, 3 is false, 4 is false, 5 is true, 6 is true, 7 is true, 8 is false, 9 is true, and 10 is true. And then section 3, give the answers to 2, 3, and 5. 2 is missing the point. Right? Tagging by graffiti artists has become a terrible problem in recent years. Obviously, our schools are stifling the creative spirit of these young people. This is missing the point. It's not dealing with the conclusion about tagging by graffiti artists has become a terrible problem in recent years. The issue is, the conclusion ought to be, how do we deal with tagging by graffiti artists, not about the creative spirit of young people. So missing the point is the fallacy here. Number 3 is appeal to the people. It says, according to certain reports, when Barack Obama was a youngster, he attended a Muslim seminary in Indonesia for 4 years. Others say that when he was sworn in as senator, he placed his hand on a Quran instead of a Bible. And some say he bears a striking resemblance to the Antichrist. Moreover, countless email messages speak of Muslim sleeper cells hidden away in every branch of government. Could they all be linked to Obama? Just imagine. He gives a signal and they all spring into action. In no time, our Constitution is replaced by Sharia law. We can't wait a minute longer. Obama must be impeached and removed from office. This uses a number of instances of countless emails, many have seen, and so on and so forth. So it's basically making an appeal to sort of people without giving any real reasons or support for the claims that are being made. And the last one here is number 5. When the farmer sows in the spring, he reaps in the fall. In the spring, he sows $8 per bushel for soybeans. Therefore, in the fall, he will reap $8 per bushel in soybeans. The rule that applies in the fall is not necessarily the same rule that will apply in the spring. So this is the fallacy of accident. And so that's it for section 3.3. Then we moved on into the last of the fallacies. And this is 3.4. And section 1, we'll do 3, 5, 9, 11, and 15. So 3 is equivocation. An athlete is a human being, therefore a good athlete is a good human being. Good is being used in two different senses, good as in morally good and good as in athletically good. Can't draw one conclusion from the other because it has two very different meanings. Number 5, why is it so difficult for you to reach a decision? That would be an example of complex question, though I could also see a case being made for it being no fallacy at all. That's not a very good example, but I didn't write the textbook. Number 9 is suppressed evidence. Right, 20 years ago, Kung Fong, the great sumo wrestler, could have yanked up one of the fir trees in the new municipal arboretum with a single pull. Therefore, since Mr. Fong is as strong today as he was then, he could just as easily pull up one of those trees today. What is not presented here is how big the tree has grown in the last 20 years. Since that evidence hasn't been presented, we can't draw that conclusion. We'd have to know whether the tree has grown in the last 20 years or not, and it probably has. Number 11, Alex, I heard your testimony in court earlier today. Tell me, why did you lie on the witness stand? There's another example of a complex question. So anytime it's an example of have you stopped beating your wife lately type of question, it's almost always certainly going to be a complex question fallacy. And number 15, George said that he was interviewing for a job drilling oil wells in the supervisor's office. We can only conclude that the supervisor must have an awfully dirty office. So talking about drilling for oil in an office is different from actually drilling oil in the office. It's that ambiguity that's being used for that conclusion here. So that's the fallacy of amphiboly. Section 2 was again identifying whether the 15 are true or false. So 1 is true, 2 is true, 3 is true, 4 is true, 5 is false, 6 is false, 7 true, 8 false, 9 false, 10 true, 11 true, 12 false, 13 true, 14 false, 15 true. Section 3, last of the homework for this section. I'll do 3, 5, 9, 11, and 15. Number 3 is appeal to unqualified authority. A state representative is not necessarily an expert about how we should go about preventing future shootings. He could be, but we can't simply assume that he is. Number 5, every member of the Delta Club is over 70 years old. Therefore, the Delta Club must be over 70 years old. That's going from an attribute of the parts that make up a group or organization as a whole, and assuming that the organization as a whole has all the characteristics of the parts. That's not true. That's a fallacy of composition. Number 9, no one has ever proved that the human fetus is not a person with rights. Therefore, abortion is morally wrong. This is the appeal to ignorance. Probably can't be proven whether or not a fetus is a person with or not a person with rights. So that would be, again, an appeal to ignorance. Number 11 is weak analogy. When a car breaks down so often that repairs become pointless, the car is thrown on the junk heap. Similarly, when a person becomes old and diseased, he or she should be mercifully put to death. Comparing an old car with an old human being is a very weak analogy. And finally, the last one, number 15. Paul, it was great to see you at the party the other night. Everyone there was doing crack. Incidentally, how long have you been dealing that stuff? Again, that's a complex question. All right, that's it for this section. If you feel good with all this and don't have many questions, then you might be ready to go on and take the quiz and then go on to section 4.